You're on a low carbohydrate diet, or you're thinking of starting a low carbohydrate diet, but you're afraid that this diet, being low carb and by definition higher in fat and protein, is going to raise your cholesterol and in turn give you a higher risk of suffering from heart disease, getting a heart attack or diabetes. That's a legitimate concern. No one wants to follow a diet, and no one should follow a diet that is going to increase the risk of heart disease. In today's video, I hope that I can shed a little bit of light on the reality behind this low-fat paradigm, this fraudulent link between high cholesterol and heart disease, and hopefully calm your fears a little bit so that you can breathe easy knowing that this low carbohydrate, high fat, high protein diet is not only not going to kill you of a heart attack or heart disease, but it's actually beneficial for you. Towards the end of this video, I'm also going to give you different measurements that you can take yourself or with the help of your doctor so that you alone can gauge whether your risk of heart disease is increasing or decreasing on this way of eating. Hello everyone, my name is Reina. I'm a registered nurse and stay-at-home mom of 2, and for over 2 years I've been following a low carbohydrate diet. And today I'm going to be sharing with you guys a little bit of the basics of the story of how this fat-free paradigm, this ideology came to be, and how its basis is not only a lie, but it is completely based on really bad science, if you can even call it that. It started with this very prominent scientist named Ansel Keys in the 1900s. And in the 1950s, when heart disease began to rise, he kind of wanted to take this on, and he hypothesized that it was the cholesterol in our diets that was directly causing heart disease. And so he did this study, the 7-country study, his most famous study, in which he went to 7 different countries and studied over 12,000 participants. And he took samples of their blood, he took samples of their food, he studied them over a long period of time, and then reported on the results. And he reported that the results were, he had this chart where he reported, very clearly that the higher the levels of dietary fat, the higher the levels of heart disease. So it became just this mind-blowing discovery. It exploded everywhere. It was in the media. Huge corporations took it on and kind of backed him up in it. The American Heart Association was started, and he became a leader in that organization. And they got backed up by big food corporations and sugar corporations, and just there was a lot of support behind him, and people wanted answers, right? So it just made sense that that you eat fat and that fat clogs your arteries. He provided such a simple explanation that it wasn't hard for people to take it on as fact without really looking at the study closer. So in 2015, reports came out, I believe in the American Heart Association, I'm not sure, but reports came out, and I'm going to link them below, and people had known before, people had challenged his ideas many times prior, but again, he just became so big, this ideology that fat was the thing to blame for heart disease just became so big that everything else was shut down. And so these reports, several years later, after this has been accepted, right, that fat and that cholesterol leads to heart disease, reports come out that out of the over 12,000 participants, he only reported data on like 400 and something participants. The data that he did report was manipulated in a way that supported only his hypothesis. And this data was manipulated in several different ways, starting off by cherry picking the countries. They weren't randomly picked. He picked them himself, countries that he thought would support his hypothesis. And then he went on to gather all of this data only to report a very small amount of it, the stuff that backed his hypothesis up the most. So when the reports came out and scientists looked at all of the data, they found that there was no correlation between dietary fat and heart disease, much less a causation, right? Correlation means that two things happened at the same time. Causation means that one thing caused the other. This study didn't prove either. So it was entirely fraudulent, but it was too late. Huge systems had already taken this on. This was decades later. It was already in our healthcare system, our schools, our media, everywhere. And somehow it has not died down. So that is basically the essence of this fat-free ideology, this fat-free lie, this fat-free myth that that America is living now. And not just America. This guy was so influential, and the American Heart Association became so influential, not just in America, but in lots of other countries. And so once America went fat-free, other countries started to follow lead. There is other intricacies, but that is the basis of why we think, and why your grandma thinks, that fat is bad, and why we grew up trimming the fat off our meat and not eating too much bacon and eating turkey bacon. So I hope that calms your fears a little bit at least, and motivates you to maybe look further into it, and hopefully convinces you that cholesterol is not a cause for concern. You'll find lots of ketovore, carnivore people here on YouTube who post their cholesterol numbers, their lab work. And I posted my lab work as well in my triple B&E video on how high my cholesterol was, my total cholesterol. But my triglycerides are great, my HDL are great, my hemoglobin is great. And those are the markers of real concern. Those are the markers that have been linked to heart disease, stroke, heart attack. I'm also sharing this with you guys because if you are already on a low carbohydrate diet, or you're thinking of going on one, then fat and protein automatically become more essential or more important in your diet. They're already essential nutrients. Fat and protein are essential. Your body, your bones, and your muscles and your brain are made of fat and protein. Everything. There's nothing in your body made from carbohydrates. It is not an essential nutrient. You do not need it. And it makes sense, right? I know that I am not the only one who knows people personally, people in my own family who, grew up with this ideology that fat is bad and cholesterol is bad, and we need to avoid it at all costs. And so they led a life eating very little meat. There are people in my family, several, who have eaten red meat a handful of times. I kid you not. And so their diet, their entire life, has been 95% vegetarian, yet they are on statin drugs. And I am not the only one who knows a person like that. So then my question is, what do you blame it on then? And the answer, the real answer, is look at the sugar consumption. And when I say sugar, I don't just mean in sweets, right? There's people who say, well, I don't eat sweets. I don't even like sweets. Why am I diabetic? Well, because we don't realize also that carbohydrates turn into glucose in our body. And, that's kind of been the consequence of this entire premise, this fraudulent premise that people then started consuming more carbohydrates and very little fat, very little protein, and heart disease has tripled. That's not a coincidence. All right, now I'm going to talk to you guys about some measurements that you can take yourself, or you can go to your doctor's office to take, to make sure that this way of eating is not worsening your health and is not by any means increasing your risk of heart disease, heart attack, or stroke. The first one is imaging. Imaging doesn't lie. So there's CTs, there's MRIs, ultrasounds of your heart called an echo. There's lots of different imaging that you can do. One that you can do yourself is the waist to height ratio, and that actually has been shown to be a better predictor of heart disease than your BMI. So I don't know why this isn't checked regularly at doctor's office, but essentially what you do is you measure your waist around your belly button in inches or centimeters, and then you measure your height in inches or centimeters, and then you divide your waist by your height. And a level of 0.5 or less means that your risk of heart disease or metabolic disease is low. And if it's above 0.5, that means that your risk of heart disease or metabolic disease is high. If that's the case, then you need to adopt a low carbohydrate diet right away. And ideally, find a doctor that supports this way and is a little bit more knowledgeable about this way of eating. The next one, the markers that actually do predict heart disease, is HDL and triglycerides. So a higher HDL level over 60 and a low triglyceride levels below 150 has actually been shown to be a better predictor of metabolic health or disease than total cholesterol or LDL cholesterol. Next one is your hemoglobin A1C. Anything below 5.6 is great. Anything above 5.7, you need to urgently take on a low carbohydrate diet and look into reversing this pre-diabetes or diabetes. And the last one is a fasting insulin level. There is not a concrete number that people agree on, that labs agree on. It's between 2 and 20, but I've heard Dr. Barry here on YouTube say that 10 or below is ideal. So it seems to be that the lower the better when it comes to your fasting insulin levels. All right, you guys, thanks so much for watching. If you liked today's video, please hit the thumb up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified of my next video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Hey guys, if you're still watching, I wanted to say a quick thank you, especially to all the people who comment and share their stories and their experiences on a low carbohydrate diet in the comments of any video. I've learned a lot from you guys, and it only motivates me more to keep sharing these videos and to keep sharing my story, but it's not as inspirational as y'all's. So you have no idea how much these comments mean to me, because there are people watching and reading these comments and learning and being motivated by your experience. So thank you.